Hi, I'm Bobby Harrington. I'm the director of discipleship.org, and I want to talk to you about discipleship in a local church context if you're a church planter or a church leader. I want to talk to you about what I think are the three most important things to bear in mind when you're planting a church. You'll find more about each of these in a book that Zondervan is publishing called The Disciple Maker's Handbook. But let me just give you the short version of it in case you're not a reader or won't have the ability to do it. I think these three things are the most important things when planting a church. And I say that having a background of spending a lot of time training hundreds of church planters, helping create church planting networks and all those things. I was a latecomer to the game of really realizing that, number one, discipleship is the core mission of the local church. There are a lot of things you can do in the local church that are important: praise and worship, serve the poor, study the Bible, pray together. But underneath all of these things, it is super important that you realize that in the mind of God, the core mission of the local church is discipleship, which we define as helping people trust and follow Jesus. So from the very beginning, behind everything we do, we're trying to form our lives around Jesus. We're trying to trust and follow him. We're trying to get everybody to be about that one thing above all else. So when you start your church, if you start with that end in mind, it influences everything you do. It influences how you do praise and worship. It influences how you do serving the poor. It influences how you do prayer and Bible study. Because behind each of these things, we're thinking, how can we help people trust and follow Jesus? So, for example, when you're serving the poor, when you're launching a missional community, the self-conscious and the explicit idea to everybody who's on your launch team or everyone who's launching the missional community is, actually by doing this, we're being like Jesus, we're trusting and following his way for our life, and we're inviting other people into our community to trust and follow Jesus together. The second thing that I want to tell you, and if I were myself replanting a church today and going back and starting all over again, the second thing that I would do is I would make sure that I, the leader, establish the DNA of relational discipleship from the very beginning. And here's what I mean by that. Because if I just say, establish the DNA of relational discipleship, every church planter on the planet would agree with that. But here's what I mean. I mean that from the very beginning and throughout the entire process of my leadership, you should be able to see in my life the model of Jesus, where I invest in people. I invest relationally in people, like Jesus did with Peter, James, and John, where there's certain people, and we talk a little bit more in the book about how to find these people, but there are certain people that God raises up in our midst, and we invest in them the way Jesus invested in those men, the way Paul invested in Timothy, and the way Paul told Timothy in 2 Timothy 2:2 to that which Timothy learned from Paul, and Paul entrusted to Timothy, Timothy was to entrust it into other men. And the way they did that, the way Paul did that with Timothy, the way Timothy did that with his men, and the way Jesus did that beforehand, was relationships for discipleship. I often meet church planters, and they're saying, well, what can I do right now? You know what you can do right now? You can start discipling people through relationships and gathering and meeting with them and loving them and serving with them through your own life right away. The third thing that I would like to tell all church planters about discipleship and all church leaders is that when you add staff, there's a very important mindset that you should have. And the mindset is not just that they should be about making disciples. That's true. But when you are privileged to be full-time on church staff or even part-time, your role becomes not making disciples, but making disciple makers. And so a church leader's primary role, next to walking with God and being an authentic disciple of Jesus, is to raise up other disciple makers whom you will raise up by your modeling, by your love, by your teaching, by your intentionality, by your shepherding, and then they will go out and disciple other people who will, learning from them, be raised up to disciple other people, and so forth. Sometimes people talk about developing a leadership pipeline. I'm not talking about developing a leadership pipeline. I'm talking about raising up a disciple maker pipeline, and that's very different. There are people who have leadership skills and abilities that can be developed to do great things in a church. But what I think is more important is that we raise up people who will invest in relationships with other people, who will love them the way Jesus loved his disciples. And as you, as the church leader or church planter, replicate the model of Jesus by raising up disciple makers, and you raise up disciple makers who go out to raise out disciple makers who go out to raise up disciple makers. That's God's best plan. It's what Jesus modeled for us. And I hope as you plant a church, you bear those three things in mind. And if you'd like to learn more about it, I encourage you to look at the book, The Disciple Maker's Handbook, and you can also check out more resources at discipleship.org. Thank you very much.